In quiet little town of Canton, where the moonlight softly gleamed, there stood a lonely cornfield where no soul ever dreamed. For in the heart of that field, amidst the golden rows, a scarecrow hung in silence, where the night wind seldom blows. This scarecrow wasn't ordinary, it had a wicked heart, with eyes of coal that glistened and a mind sharp as a dart. At dusk, when shadows lengthened and the stars began to rise, it creaked and came to life, with malice in its eyes. The farmer knew the secret of this cursed piece of straw. He'd stitched it with his hands and placed it with a flaw. A spell was whispered low as he tied the final thread, a curse upon the land where the living soon were dead. When nightfall draped the cornfield in a cloak of darkest shade, the scarecrow would awaken, and its hunger was displayed. Its steps were slow and silent as it moved among the corn, seeking out the foolish who would trespass so forlorn. The first who wandered in on a dare beneath the moon met with horror quickly in that haunted, cursed lagoon. The scarecrow's fingers twisted, turning sharp as blades. It sliced through flesh and sinew as the terror never fades. It carved out hearts like pumpkins with a ghastly, gory touch, then buried them in soil where the roots would start to clutch. The bodies it would string up like scarecrows in the night, their faces frozen, twisted in a mask of endless fright. A young man dared to enter with a laugh and taunting cry. He thought the tales were foolish, just a local farmer's lie. But as he walked the rows with his flashlight dim and weak, he felt the air grow heavy and the darkness start to creep. The scarecrow came upon him with a sudden, deadly swoop. Its fingers turned to talons, and it struck like a bird of coop. It gouged out both his eyes with a swift and brutal rake, then shoved them in his mouth, leaving death in its wake. His screams were short and hollow as the scarecrow tore his throat. His blood soaked through the soil where the corn began to gloat. The body was left dangling from a post for all to see, a warning to the village, but they still did not flee. Another night, a woman, lost and seeking out her child, she'd heard his voice among the stalks, so haunting, meek and mild. But it was not her son's voice, no, it was the scarecrow's trick. It lured her through the cornfield with footsteps soft and quick. When she found herself surrounded by the rustling golden ears, the scarecrow's mouth unhinged and filled her heart with fears. Its jaws were like a grinder, its teeth as sharp as glass. It bit into her skull and ground her bones to ash. Her body twisted, contorted, as it pulled her limbs apart. It ripped out all her organs as it feasted on her heart. Her flesh turned into gourds, her bones into brittle stalks. The scarecrow laughed in silence as the wind began to talk. The farmer knew each morning, as he walked among the rows, the fruits and vegetables were ripe from where the dead now grows. A pumpkin plump and orange, or a melon round and sweet, a tomato red as blood, or corn with tender meat. He picked them with a knowing and a darkened, greedy grin, for every fruit he plucked was born of someone's sin. He sold them at the market with their flesh so firm and ripe, and the townsfolk never questioned as they took a juicy bite. But whispers filled the village as the nights grew ever cold, of missing friends and family, and crops of fruits untold. Yet none could trace the horror to the farmer's wicked hand, for who would ever guess the truth beneath the land? And still the scarecrow lingers, in the field it calls its home, awaiting the next victim, who through the stalks will roam. So if you ever wander where the corn grows tall and wild, beware the lurking scarecrow, and its heart so cold and vile. In the 1970s, in a town long forgotten of serene grace, lived simple folks in a quiet place. But in the fields where the cornstalks grew, a scarecrow stood, and the darkness too. Its eyes were hollow, its grin grotesque. With a heart of malice, it was far from rest. By day it watched with a lifeless stare, but night would bring a living nightmare. One stormy night, when the moon turned red, the scarecrow stirred. A curse was spread. It ripped its bindings, straw and bone. Now something wicked called it home. Through the town it moved with silent stride. No one heard it, none could hide. The first to die was Old Man Gray, his body found torn and flayed. His eyes gouged out, his mouth agape, his skin peeled back like a tattered drape. His blood ran cold, soaked into the earth. The scarecrow's hunger found its worth. Then to the mayor it crept with haste, his heart ripped out, not a drop to waste. His scream was choked, his life expired. In his chest a straw heart conspired. The blacksmith fought with hammer and fire, but his forge turned into a funeral pyre. His skin bubbled, his bones did crack. The scarecrow left him a charred, twisted stack. The town was aflame, in terror it wept, as the scarecrow slaughtered while shadows crept. No weapon harmed it, no prayers were heard. It killed with ease, undeterred. The priest tried to banish the fiend from hell, but his faith faltered as the church bell fell. The scarecrow tore him limb from limb, the sacred altar stained with sin. Bloodied streets and broken homes, the town was a grave. The scarecrow roamed. Its laughter echoed in the night as it fed on fear, feasting on fright. The government came with their finest men, armed with weapons again and again. They tracked it down, they thought it caught, but in the night the scarecrow fought. Their guns were useless, their strength in vain, for the scarecrow welcomed all their pain. One by one they met their fate, ripped to shreds by the fiend they'd hate. An agent's throat was slashed ear to ear, his blood sprayed out, thick and clear. Another was found with his spine torn out, his hollowed corpse left twisted about. They tried fire, but the flames did dance around the scarecrow in a dark romance. It walked through the blaze with a chilling grin. As their flesh melted, their bones caved in. The final blow, a last-ditch ploy. A bomb was set to destroy the toy. It detonated with a thunderous roar, but the scarecrow stood hungry for more. At last they brought it to its knees with ancient rites and dying pleas. They buried it deep with secrets and lies, but the fear remained in cold, dead eyes. They covered it up, the murders, the dread, hushed every whisper of the dead. But 30 years passed and the story grew of the scarecrow that none could subdue. In the shadows it stirred once more, revived by evil's endless core. No one knew where it began its spree, but blood soon flowed like a crimson sea. A farmer found with his skull crushed in, his body twisted in a grisly spin. A woman's heart torn from her chest, her face a mask of silent unrest. Government men again did rise to face the horror with desperate cries. But the scarecrow was quicker, it hunted with glee. Their deaths more savage, a dark decree. One man was impaled on a rusty spike, his body writhing, drained of life. Another drowned in his own blood as the scarecrow laughed, savoring the flood. No one's seen it, yet all feel its breath, for in its path there's only death. And so the tale goes through the years of a scarecrow that feeds on fears.